Quick tropical update here as we look at the potential for something to try to develop in the Gulf as we go through the next couple of weeks. The pattern certainly setting up to show favorable conditions across the northern Gulf and possibly even across the Gulf Stream and the Atlantic. But overall, we don't have any modeling out there indicating any kind of tropical genesis over the next 7 days. The National Hurricane Center is still going with no chances of tropical development over the next 7 days. So keeping a close eye on a series of things that have to play out in order for this to happen. And at most, we're probably talking about a rainmaker across the northern Gulf, if anything, over the next 2 weeks, unless we get some kind of surprise, which certainly is the possibility of that, because again, we are going to be heading into a very favorable pattern. And all that means is that something could happen if we get the right ingredients to align. At the moment, none of the modeling suggesting that, just seeing a pattern that shows favorability. So let's break that down and what that actually looks like as we check out the overall analysis of what's going on out there at the current moment. This is the live conditions and the water vapor imagery. The orange here showing dry air and all of the green here showing lots of moisture. So what you see there, this is just pop-up showers and thunderstorms working across the southeast. And you can see the high pressure that's in control across the Gulf right now, helping to create that flow across the southeast, which everyone says, well, I never see anything move from east to west. Well, when you have a high pressure centered basically over the Carolinas, that's when we get this flow out of the east to west. Or you can see the subtropical high here, which has got a big upper level low working around it, which is situated way out here. So as I clear this map out for you, you'll get a better idea of what we're talking about. This is actually the general overall flow going on right now, and that's because the subtropical high is in control. That's also why it is so dang hot out there, is because you got high pressure just pushing air down to the surface. Now, obviously, we're getting a little bit of lift with all the moisture around, which is why you're seeing the showers and thunderstorms working across the southeast. But that doesn't really speak to what's going on. As we have to zoom out a little bit further here, you can see a very stretched out frontal boundary right there, and then our stationary boundary that's still hanging out across the Carolinas, stretched out across the southeast as well. So what's going to happen is, as this front works off to the east, we're going to break off some piece of energy across the Carolinas, and it will end up like this. Well, remember, we've got high pressure in control across the southeast, so a little piece of energy that ends up out here, well, it's going to do something like that, because it's going to work around that high pressure ridge and be guided by that. And as long as there's weakness to it, meaning that it is a very weak system or very broad system, that will be the overall flow. Once it ever starts to strengthen, if it starts to strengthen, then there's different levels of the atmosphere that start to work on that system. And at that point, it will try to pull to the north. So that's ingredient number one that is inhibiting some kind of development, is that as this starts to try to strengthen, it's going to want to be pulled off to the north. Well, the likelihood of a low ending up this far south seems pretty unlikely at this point. It looks like you're going to get some kind of trough down in here. So once it tries to develop, it's going to quickly be pulled over land. So chances that you get something to really organize and then stay out over water look pretty limited unless we get a very strong frontal boundary to work in and help to suppress that low further off to the south, which again just doesn't look like that is going to be the case as we are looking at the forecast as it stands right now. So with that, this is what the National Hurricane Center has. No tropical formation over the next 7 days in the eastern Pacific, albeit maybe something about the day 7 or 6 or 7 or 8 range that may try to develop in the eastern Pacific, but that should stay out over water and not affect Mexico or any landmass either. And then you can see the Atlantic with a lot of widespread unfavorable conditions. Where you do have some favorable conditions are way out to the east, a little bit closer to Africa and the main development region. Unfortunately for any of those waves, you can see the very hostile environment across the Caribbean that extends out into the subtropics as well. As you work further off to the north, still very unfavorable. And all of that red and the water vapor imagery there, that's Saharan dust, and there's plenty of it. Typically, we start to see Saharan dust drop off as it's working across the Atlantic. Sometime in July is usually when we start to see that drop off, because you have to keep in mind that the majority of our tropical activity actually happens between about August 20th and October 20th. So we're not even really into the heart of hurricane season yet. We have had 3 named storms. All of them have been relatively minor, albeit Barry that worked into Mexico, the remnants of Barry and that vorticity associated with it is what produced all of the rain across Texas. It got caught up in a stationary boundary, just sat there for a couple of days, and unfortunately, a very heavy thunderstorm popped up at a very inopportune time. A lot of people weren't paying attention to the weather. and you just get a very heavy amount of rain over a very flash flood prone area, and consequences happen, unfortunately, for that. So we have had some tropical consequences this year already, and that coming from Barry itself. The other two systems, Chantal and then Andrea, obviously staying way out into the water. Chantal actually caused a lot of flash flooding across North Carolina, overshadowed by the flash flooding that was going on in Texas around the same time. But quite historic flooding going on across central North Carolina thanks to Chantal. So even when storms are not all that strong, they can have some dire consequences. So as we are looking forward here, even though we are not expecting any kind of major tropical development over the next 7 days, potentially day 7, 8, 9, or even in that day 7 time frame, we could see a tropical low or at least a surface low try to develop. And again, it's going to be as these frontal boundaries interact and then rotate around that high pressure system that is in control, causing all of the heat. So you can see little surface boundary, that surface swirl there to the south of Panama City, but what I have in the yellow there, that's actually mid-level vorticity. So when you get a tropical system to develop, you'll see basically a circle with that mid-level vorticity, and you can see how spread out and sloppy this is because it just doesn't have a whole lot of time to develop. So as we get into next Tuesday, we'll start to ingest a lot of that tropical moisture across the southeast here, which will enhance our rain. But as that system tries to develop, well, it's immediately being pulled off to the north because that's where the mid and upper level flow is going to be steering things, and that just kind of stretches it out and pulls it to the north. Again, a very similar setup to what we had with Chantal will still be around as we get toward next weekend. So we'll have another frontal boundary coming down. We're going to have basically the same setup across the Gulf as well as the Atlantic. So eventually we could see a piece of energy end up with enough time over water that it ends up producing a surface low or tropical development. But as it stands right now, all we're talking about is some heavy rain producers. And across the southeast, that might not be the worst thing because you can see it is going to be very hot as we go through the next couple of days and even into next week. So thankfully that tropical moisture will help to stamp out some of this heat. It may just be a steam bath for most of us, but at least we will be talking about those daytime highs not being quite as extreme, whereas you can see lack of rain going back across Texas into the plains and those temperatures soaring out there. They certainly need to dry out across Texas as well as into Oklahoma. I could probably use a little rain in Oklahoma, but everywhere else could really dry out. For the southeast and the deep south here, looking likely that we're going to be holding on to quite a bit of moisture. So with that, again, we're talking about the pattern here and the overall setup. Nothing indicating at this point in time any kind of tropical development. So if you're seeing any post out there, whether it be from a media outlet or some other place, they're really looking for clicks. So if they're showing you a tropical low developing in the Gulf, that's definitely what they're trying to do. They're trying to drive traffic to something or for someone because there's just really not a whole lot to talk about at this point. Is there a favorable setup? Absolutely. But not seeing anything that is saying, yeah, we're going to see something develop. Definitely need to keep our eye on the Gulf and especially the northern Gulf as we get these pieces of energy to work through. Things can happen quickly, but they don't happen like that. You usually get the low out there and then you see it slowly work down to the surface. And then once it's established, that's when you can start to see things happen relatively quickly. They're usually not overnight type of development and systems that happen, especially this time of year with this kind of setup. So I would call this marginally favorable. The overall setup over the next couple of weeks is definitely favorable, but just not seeing a whole lot out there at the moment that is screaming, oh, we really got to pay attention to this, outside of the fact that we are going to be driving a lot of moisture across the southeast as well as up into the Carolinas too, places that really don't need to see the rain. For us here locally in the Panhandle, we probably could use a little bit of rain, and we certainly could use a break from the heat because it is going to be quite warm. But that's all I have for now. Again, we'll update as we go forward. If things start to change or we see something that's indicating a little better of a situation or that a better understanding of what potentially could develop out of that, we'll jump back on and give some kind of update to that. But that's all we got for now. More rain on the way after we get rid of some of this heat. It's still going to be hot next week, unfortunately.